Hey everyone, it's me again, Chicken Ooble. I wanted to release this video closer to the new year, but I was holding out for the 2023 roadmap, and that didn't come out yet, so I'm going to release this anyways. We're only a few weeks into 2023, and I figured it's still early enough to take a trip down memory lane and reflect on the previous year. I'll share what I thought were the most important or impactful events, releases, and topics for the Guild Wars 2 community and ArenaNet, and we'll see how many W's and L's they farmed. We'll look at all sorts of things in this video, from awards to statements and whatever data and metrics I can pull up. Now obviously this is all my opinion, everything from the topics I chose to my thoughts on those topics. Now I get that you're probably going to disagree with me on some things, and that's fine, you're allowed to be wrong. If you have any thoughts about something that I didn't add to the list, or if you disagree with one of my takes, just log your complaints in the comments below. Unless you're going to complain about spoilers, because there will be some minor spoilers in this video, so consider yourself warned. Without further ado, let's reflect on 2022. Just how good of a year was it for Guild Wars 2 and ArenaNet? With ArenaNet's communication with the community this year. In the months leading up to the End of Dragon's release, ArenaNet had a lot of developer live streams cast to their Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook channels. We had the map designers talk about the different areas to explore, elite specialization previews, mastery previews, and ArenaNet produced guild chats where we learned more about the behind-the-scenes stuff, like how the soundtrack was produced. Now obviously that was all promotional content for the expansion, I get that, but it was good to see the developers on stream talking about the content that they designed, to see their passion for their craft, and their ability to get away with murder.
I will draw our attention to, which is incredibly important. You'll see that there's a kitten on the roof, and there's...
Oh no!
And
what happened? Connor! What did you do?
I guess, I was trying to, so I guess at some point I typed a death command kill.
Yeah, that spawned some memes for days. Now I want to point out that the communication was good after the expansion drop. We didn't get as many developer live streams, but we did get blog posts talking about what ArenaNet learned from the WVW Restructure beta weekends, and we got quarterly roadmaps discussing upcoming content and feature releases. And it didn't go unnoticed. From those that I communicate with in-game and in the community, the continued transparency and communication has done a lot for player confidence in the game and studio. We know what ArenaNet is up to, and it feels good to not be left in the dark. In fact, that's partly why 7 of 10 massively OP staff named ArenaNet as the MMO Studio of the Year for a second year in a row. Brianna Royce said, after a few years of negative awards, in 2021, ArenaNet turned around its communication and actually started delivering what players wanted. 2022 has taken that pattern and cemented it as a pathway, not just with End of Dragons, but with continuing the communication. And Colin Henry said, the biggest reason I voted for ArenaNet is the increased transparency it had in the area of combat balance. This summer, ArenaNet put out, quite frankly, a bad balance patch. So let's get this one out of the way. I'm normally a smooth brain when it comes to theory crafting different builds in Guild Wars 2. ArenaNet comes out with a balance patch, I skim through it, and just wait for other people to sort out how this is going to affect the builds that I play. And if I don't like the changes, then I just pick a different profession or spec. But as I skimmed through the June 28th balance patch, there were some things that even looked a little sus to me. Banner nerfs, Guardians and Engineers looked strong. I'm not going into all the details of the balance patch, but I'm going to give ArenaNet an L for botching that balance patch preview so badly and riling up the community so much. Anyways, Colin continues, most companies would have just moved on and pretend it was fine, but ArenaNet's combat team came out and owned it and promised to do better in the future. They published a lengthy balance manifesto, and subsequent patches have gone a long way in addressing player feedback in the area of balance. It has been great to see CMC on streams going into great detail about what's coming and why. And now this is true. Immediately after the balance preview and patch, there was a post by the game director vowing to do better, and we started seeing more balance patch previews and balance philosophy live streams. Plus, balance preview blog posts were released well in advance of the patch going live, and they also gave additional context for those changes. So even though ArenaNet had a misstep by not communicating their plans clearly before the summer balance patch, they did have solid communication before the End of Dragons release and throughout the year for most of everything except that summer balance patch. All in all, I think ArenaNet did a fine job with communication this year, and I'm going to be giving them a W for this one. Now obviously the biggest event of the year came in February when the third expansion, End of Dragons, was released and players could finally return to the Dragon Empire, Cantha. See, Cantha was this Asia-inspired region of the world that players explored during the original Guild Wars faction campaign back in 2006. I never played Guild Wars, and I simply didn't have the same level of nostalgia, but a lot of people apparently did because I feel like ever since Guild Wars 2 came out, all I ever heard was the question,
Cantha win.
But here we are, back in Cantha, about 250 years after the events of the faction's campaign, and apparently a lot has changed during that time skip. Cantha went through something of a technological renaissance after developing a new source of energy in the region, enabling the region to advance their technology faster than other human kingdoms during that same time. It's almost like they skipped the entire human tech tree and went right into the future age with this discovery. The expansion delivered 4 new maps south of the Unending Ocean, the vibrant and lively Saitung province in the Xingji Isles, the towering metropolis of New Kainang City, the revitalized Echovold Wilds and the Cathedral of Arborstone, and finally the industrial Jade Sea quarries at Dragon's End. Players can also claim a new guild hall located in the South Xingji Isles, the Isle of Reflection. As for the story, it had 16 chapters this time around. Players meet an old foe from Living World Season 1, they meet a new Asura hellbent on watching the world burn, and as the name suggests, concludes the 10-year-long Elder Dragon arc. Each of the 9 professions had a new elite specialization. A new 2-player combat mount called the Siege Turtle was added to the game. We also received a 5-player fishing boat called the Skiff to go along with our new fishing mechanic. That's a thing now, and players that completed the first mission in End of Dragons can fish almost anywhere in the entire game. We also had 4 story mode bosses get turned into 10-man strike mission encounters, new weapon and armor collections, achievements, and more. The expansion was received pretty well by the community. On Metacritic, the expansion received generally favorable reviews, with an 81 from critics and a 7.7 from users, which is the highest user-reviewed GW2 expansion on Metacritic. As for awards, End of Dragons was nominated for the Best Expansion in the 2022 Golden Joystick Awards, was announced as the winner of Massively OP's staff pick for Best MMO Expansion of 2022, and they also won MMORPG.com's 2022 Player Choice MMORPG of the Year. So, we're going to be giving ArenaNet a W for making a good expansion. Another thing I want to point out has to do with the actual launch of End of Dragons. ArenaNet had a pre-launch stream that ended with the countdown to launch. Within seconds of the countdown reaching 0, I launched my game and downloaded the expansion. Now, the reason I bring this up is many MMOs either launched or had new expansions this year, and I think Guild Wars 2 was the only game to not have launch issues, server queues, or outages. Players of other games had to wait for hours just to play a game that they have to pay a monthly sub for, but over here in Guild Wars 2 land, we jumped right in and played right away. So this is a big W to the wizards at ArenaNet, who have the best server architecture in the industry.
Yeah, well, you don't have queues or wait times because no one plays Guild Wars 2. It's a dead game.
Okay, look, we're not the biggest MMO on the market, but we're not dead. We're actually growing. 3 statements from ArenaNet this year caught my attention. In a blog post from March 22nd, we learned that the Guild Wars 2 active player base has more than doubled over the last 3 years. We also learned that the player growth helped the End of Dragons expansion outsell the Path of Fire expansion a month after its release. And a third bit of news was that 2022 had the largest new player growth year since 2015, when Heart of Thorns, the first expansion, was released and the game had a free-to-play option. Now, we don't have any specific numbers about any of this stuff, but if we're taking ArenaNet for their word, population increases are generally a good thing, so I'm giving a W to ArenaNet. For those that don't know, I'm a huge fan of large map-wide meta events that force players to split into smaller groups to work separately, but together, to achieve an end goal. Dragon's End was probably the highlight of the expansion for me because it took the population, split them into multiple escort paths with objectives to complete along the way that culminated with the final spectacular assault on an Elder Dragon. The final encounter at launch forced players to deal with actual game mechanics that punished players when they didn't. I like that. I like that the game had some open world challenge. So, for ArenaNet finally bringing back a large, enjoyable map-wide meta, they get a W. But at launch, ArenaNet locked the Siege Turtle behind the completion of Dragon's End. And like I just said, the meta event was challenging. This, as you might expect, was a problem for many in the community because players wanted their Siege Turtle, but they couldn't get a successful kill on Suwon. ArenaNet responded by fixing some mechanics that weren't working as well as they wanted, as well as reworking a phase that players could troll the map with. And that stuff is good. But over the course of a few months, ArenaNet continued to nerf some mechanics, increasing exposed and defiance bar durations, and changing the frequency of some attacks. Now all this might sound like a good thing, and I guess depending on your perspective it is, but for me it wasn't because I enjoy having some challenging open world stuff to do. I don't want to sound all high and mighty, self-righteous and stuff like that, but failure isn't a terrible thing. Personally, I learn more when I fail than when I succeed. Even at launch, the meta event was possible if players did the pre-events and got their buffs, used boons like Alacrity or Quickness, avoided attacks, and used EMPs or other defiance damaging skills. Completion was possible if players organized, and even more so if players communicated. Now looking back through pages and pages of forum and Reddit complaints from both sides of the argument, it's apparent that this was one of the most contentious topics in the community. ArenaNet did eventually give a second path to the turtle eggs, so sure, let's give ArenaNet a win for that. Makes no difference to me though. I never got the turtle because I didn't like the way it drives, but just so I'm clear, I was squarely on team no nerf, and the encounter was nerfed. So I'm going to be giving ArenaNet an L for nerfing one of the most enjoyable meta events that I've experienced in a long time. One that should have been challenging since it is the conclusion to a 10-year-long journey. While many might disagree about whether challenging content should exist in the open world, I think everyone would agree that there should be a challenge to instanced content. In 2022, ArenaNet did release a total of 5 10-player strike missions, and I like them. The normal modes are fun, and they have a lot of mechanics. It's definitely a step up from the Icebrood Saga strike missions. And every 2022 strike mission received a challenge mode. Now, what was particularly good about this was the race to world first for the Harvest Temple CM, a multi-phase 13-minute boss fight. This was so good to see. The best players in the world competed against each other for over 6 days to secure the world first kill. People were flocking to Twitch to watch these attempts and cheer people on, and it was even creating a buzz in other MMO communities, which is a good thing. In the end, Snowcrows got the world first kill and received kudos from the game director for being the first to kill Suwon.
Let's go! Clean! Clean! Let's go!
If you want to get into endgame group content and live moments like this of your own, then I definitely recommend checking out snowcrows.com. They have a lot of resources for endgame PvE content, builds, rotations, benchmarks, and guides related to strike missions, raids, and dungeons. It can all be found here. This is one of the top endgame resources that the community relies on, so definitely check them out. And also, thank you to Luna for giving me this clip. His links will be in the video description down below, so make sure you go give him a sub or a follow. Even though I probably won't be clearing the CMs, it's still my hope that we see more of this challenging content added to the game just so we can enjoy more world first races. I'm giving a W to ArenaNet for creating something that wasn't cleared in a few hours and recognizing the world first kill on Twitter. Now, one thing that really confused me is how the new maps are missing all the fun things that I've been accustomed to finding. Things like adventures and puzzles, races, time trials, and bounty boards. Outside of Club Canuck, why aren't there any Jadebot adventures where you have to use your bot to collect items, complete an obstacle course, or use zip lines to reach a location by a certain time? Why aren't there any mount races? Why aren't there any skiff races? It would have been perfect to have one around the waterways of New Kaineng City or Saitung Province. Or what about a Treetop Tengu adventure where you have to race against an NPC using your glider and Jadebot abilities? That would have been perfect in the Echovald Wilds. Or how about the fact that each map has some primary antagonist faction, the Aetherblade, some gangs, or whatever, and your character romps around the world with some members of the Ministry of Security? Wouldn't it make sense if, at some point after you advance through the story, you could help the Ministry take care of these factions via bounty boards? Minister Lee tells Minister Min the names of some prominent purists during an interrogation, so maybe that's when the bounty boards would go live in Kaineng City. Or maybe those purists will just have some role in Season 6, who knows? Now, to ArenaNet's credit, there are fishing tournaments in each map, and Club Canuck does exist for those Simon Says aficionados, but that doesn't give me the same sense of enjoyment as all that other stuff I mentioned would have. So, since ArenaNet forgot to add the sprinkles to my cupcake, they get an L. Okay, let's talk about Legendaries. After nearly 3 years of not getting a new legendary weapon, End of Dragons introduced the 3rd generation of weapons, all themed around Aurene. And I'll be honest, if I evaluated this a year ago, I would have given it an L because the set felt like a Black Lion weapon collection. The individual weapons lacked the personality and uniqueness of Generation 1 and Generation 2. But since then, they've kinda grown on me, and I like them now. They have cool draw animations, nice footfalls, and death blow animations. Now what makes this set unique is each weapon has a variant skin themed around the Elder Dragons. It's a cool concept that makes up for the lack of personality found on the previous generations. The variants are unlocked through a rather uninspired achievement collection. I wish it had something more along the lines of the Mesmer Collective quest chain where after each objective you return to an NPC to learn more about that Elder Dragon. Despite the lame variant collections and the entire generation being themed around Aurene, I'm going to give ArenaNet a win because there is a full set of legendary weapons for players to work toward. In 2013 and 2014, ArenaNet released Living World Season 1. It was a novel idea for the time. Expand the core game by releasing small, temporary content patches that advanced the main story. These updates would last for a few weeks and then disappear forever once the next update came out. This created 2 problems though. First, it was just a waste of resources to make throwaway content. And second, it created a weird continuity gap for players, since Season 1 had a lot of content that gave information related to Season 2 and Heart of Thorns. Season 1 also introduced a lot of characters that remained relevant all the way through the last expansion. So I'm happy to say that Season 1 was re-released in 2022. ArenaNet condensed the major story beats from the original Season 1 content and re-released it across 5 replayable episodes. They updated some dialogue, voice acting lines, and some encounter mechanics, but the pacing did feel a little off and the writing isn't the best at times, and the South Sun arc didn't make the cut, so our best boy Canuck didn't get enough time in the spotlight. In the end, this re-release addressed one of the weakest points for new players who were interested in playing through the story. Normally, Living World content needs to be purchased if you don't get it at launch, but not this time because ArenaNet even made the season free for all players. Now because all players will be able to start Season 2 and not ask,
Who are you people and why are you acting like we're friends?
ArenaNet gets a W. So for the last couple years, the studio has been working on improving the performance of the game, and one way they did this was by moving from DirectX 9 to DirectX 11, and this year that was finally taken out of beta, and DirectX 11 is now the default option for all players. For most everyone that I've talked to, this change gave many players a significant performance improvement. This is an easy W for ArenaNet. For several reasons I could think of, raid participation has always been a problem for Guild Wars 2. In 2022, to help make raids more accessible, they added an Emboldened raid mode. Each week, a different raid will be selected to be emboldened. When players wipe on a boss, they'll receive 1 stack of an emboldened effect, capping out at 5 per boss. Each stack increases your health by 20%, plus increases your damage and healing output by 10%. Doubling player health and giving a 50% boost to damage and healing is big, and it's helped many people get their first raid boss kills. Now, at the beginning of last year, I made a video talking about a different idea to make raids more accessible, and I'll put a link to that in the description if anybody wants to watch it. Anyways, ArenaNet gets a W because I think it's a good addition to the game, and I feel like this has actually helped more players experience raids and build confidence with that type of endgame content. So here's a small point, and many people probably won't even know what I'm talking about, but for some reason, disconnects during story cutscenes, raids, and strike missions are still a problem for many people.
Videos on this. Chicken, why are you not in here?
I'm right.
I didn't.
No, you're not. You're not in here.
Oh, am I getting disconnected? Here's the thing. You want to know a funny thing?
Actively already has happened.
I've been disconnected?
Yeah.
Great. So I'm working on a video where I talk about... There it is. Perfect. I needed footage of this. My personal experience, I play Guild Wars 2 with my kids from time to time, and when we're going through story missions, at least one of us will disconnect during a cutscene, meaning we have to do the mission again and again for whoever disconnected. Now this was a huge problem for the first mission in End of Dragons. My youngest disconnected during the airship phase at least 4 times during the cutscene where Rama finds the commander on the beach. Now I don't know why these disconnects affect only some people, or what the common thread is between affected players, but as of a few weeks ago, this hasn't been fixed yet. Even though ArenaNet has the best server architecture for keeping the game up and running and not having queues and pushing out updates, there are some issues with clients connecting to the server from time to time. It's been this way for years, and it's so annoying. L. Even though we got a new expansion, 5 strike missions, and an instance of the Battle for Lion's Arch, it was another year where some older, long-established, and seemingly forgotten game modes didn't get any substantial content updates. It's been almost 2 years since we got the last Dragon Response mission, over 2 years since we got the Sunqua Peak Fractal, over 3.5 years since the Key of Adashim raid was released, and over 9.5 years since the last Classic Dungeon Path, the Aetherblade Retreat, was added to the game. Listen, I like strike missions, they're fun, but I do enjoy the side stories that were told in raids and Classic Dungeons, and I hope to see something more like that in the coming years.
Really? Classic Dungeons? No one wants Classic Dungeons.
Yeah, I know, Classic Dungeons are dead. Well, I guess I had high hopes for some Classic Dungeon love because ArenaNet combined all the dungeon currencies into Tales of Dungeon Delving last year. Maybe at the very least, a mechanical refresh in advance of the Steam release would have been in order. It sucks telling people that we haven't had an update to some of this stuff in such a long time. It just feeds into that dead game meme. I'm giving an L to ArenaNet because we made it another year without new content in a majority of the game modes. Raids, Dragon Response missions, Fractals, Classic Dungeons, or even a new World vs. World Borderland or PvP map. It's all missing. Another update in 2022 involved all the Starting Zone world bosses. They received visual updates, had their health adjusted, included better tells for attacks, and added more mechanics. Now, I assume this change was to give new players a more epic experience instead of watching the fire elemental melt to 50 players in mere seconds. All in all, I think this was a good change. I have no complaints. W for ArenaNet. End of Dragons released a training area Renown Heart in Saitung Province. Combo fields, defiance bars, and dodging are some of the activities you can do. But it sucks that something like this is at the start of the most recent expansion. If you're a new player looking to play the story in sequential order, then you don't get a formal introduction to certain game mechanics until way later in the game. I was complaining about this to some friends and they said that the new Starting Zone world bosses introduce those mechanics, but massive world bosses are the worst way to teach anyone about defiance bars because players have no idea if their skills are the reason the bar is going down. Going back to Classic Dungeons, what ArenaNet really needs to do is release a soloable dungeon in Lion's Arch that only has bosses that can be defeated by performing certain mechanics. Standing in greens, kiting and avoiding attacks, breaking defiance bars, performing combo finishers, and more. There could even be an NPC that helps the player understand how to deal with the mechanics, like, oh no, the only way we could beat this boss is to stand in the green circle, blah 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 blah. Teach players at level 30, since many of those mechanics will be encountered in every Classic Dungeon that the player unlocks from that point forward. ArenaNet gets an L for this idea. I wasn't impressed with this Renown Heart. This only helps new players that decide to start on End of Dragons first. ArenaNet also replaced the older new player achievements with a multi-tier character-specific adventure guide, which helps point the player into doing certain activities like dodging, killing certain types of creatures, and more mundane things like pulling vegetables out of the ground. They're good for what they are, I suppose, but here are the bad things. These achievements award a boatload of experience, causing players to quickly outlevel any of the zones that they're in for doing something simple like healing. It really screws with the pacing of the game, and I don't like that. Also, why isn't there a 6th volume that pushes players toward endgame content? One complaint that people always have is, what do you do at endgame? I'm giving ArenaNet an L for this implementation. If they add Volume 6 with achievements that guide players toward fractals, or capturing a point or earning some rank in World vs. World, or traveling to the PvP lobby and playing an unranked conquest match, or completing a strike mission or kill a raid boss if they have Path of Fire or End of Dragons, or maybe even hit some damage benchmark on the training golem in the Special Forces training area, if they did any of that stuff, then I would probably turn this into a W, because I think overall it's pretty good. But right now, it's an L. It's missing too much. Okay, trial Raptors at level 10 that disappear unless the expansion is purchased. Once you buy the expansion, then you get to keep your Raptor forever. No need to earn it, just here, take a free Raptor. I don't know. I don't like this change. I'm sure someone will say,
It's so new players can keep up with everyone else.
but all I see now is players skipping past events and using the Raptors to try to cheese simple things like tagging vistas in core Tyrian maps. I personally like the core maps, and this is just another change like the experience boost from the new player achievements that help players speed through the world. I'm giving an L for this change, since it's just another thing that turns the game into a race toward the end instead of letting players develop an appreciation for the journey. Okay, I feel like that was a lot of L's in a row, so here's a good change and an easy W. They updated the default options in the menu. That's good. I like it. Now, one of the most anticipated events in Guild Wars 2 history finally happened on August 23rd, 2022, when Guild Wars 2 launched on Steam. How'd that go? Well, the launch was fairly smooth sailing. I think I remember one day that had issues with an authentication server or something like that. The initial buzz was mostly good. There were a lot of people in the Steam discussions complaining about the complete collection costing $100.
It's a 10-year-old game. Why would I spend $100 on it?
Well, I guess ArenaNet could have done a better job explaining that it's 10 years of still relevant content, or what exactly the bundles come with, the number of new maps, elite specs, stories, exactly how much value is being added. Right now, the discussion threads have lots of players trying to explain that the $100 is a good value even for a 10-year-old game, but those explanations are only going to the people who complain or read the discussion threads. How many people don't even bother investigating further after they see the price tag and go play something else? Even though there is some confusion on the discussion board though about the price, the game is reviewing really well on Steam. With almost 7,000 reviews, 89% of them are positive, showing the game having a very positive reception. Now, I had to re-record this entire section because something changed, even though it happened in 2023. To explain, let's look at the Steam charts. From August 2022 through December 2022, the game's concurrent players dropped by almost half. And I know most games have a sharp drop in the months after a release, and I guess this was kind of to be expected. So at first, I was going to say that this was all doom and gloom even though it was expected, but in the last 2 weeks, we have seen some growth. Now, there is one thing I want to remind people of. These are concurrent GW2 players on Steam, not total accounts, meaning there were probably tens of thousands of accounts, if not more, who signed up for the game. Now, we don't have any numbers on the total number of Steam accounts created, but Steam has definitely opened the game up to a large pool of players that otherwise wouldn't have tried it. And after hearing about the new player population and growth from earlier, this kinda makes sense, right? So I'm going to be giving a W to ArenaNet. Even though I think ArenaNet could have done a better job justifying the price on the page, the launch was smooth, we saw growth, and the game is reviewing really well on Steam. So let's look at revenue now. This chart was taken from the NCSoft earnings report, and Guild Wars 2 is the light blue block at the top of each one of these stacks. Now, it might be hard to interpret this being stacked with other NCSoft titles, so let me break it down a different way. This blue line represents earnings per quarter for Guild Wars 2 for the last 3 years. We can see that there's a general upward trend with quarters 1, 2, and 3 of 2022 having some of the highest sales, being both the expansions, which we know did well, also includes cash to gem transactions. Now, I realize after editing this, I didn't adjust for inflation, but I think that these numbers would still outpace that. If anybody wants to double check me on that, let me know if I'm wrong in the comments. Anyways, I'm giving a W to ArenaNet because whenever I see an upward trend for sales, I tend to think of that as a win. I would have loved to see what the Q4 earnings report was though, but it just hasn't come out yet. And I suppose that ties nicely into my next point. ArenaNet's marketing has done a much better job this year. I haven't seen a single ad showing SugarCube attempting to communicate with people using single-syllable sounds and emojis. Instead, this year, we saw the marketing department sponsor Twitch channels and other domains to try Guild Wars 2. We saw them sponsor large YouTube content creators to plug the game in their videos, which led to this hilarious and probably completely accurate statement by Josh Strife Hayes about ArenaNet's marketing department.
And if you aren't playing an MMO right now, consider downloading this video's sponsor, Guild Wars 2. This is the second video of mine that Guild Wars 2 have sponsored quite recently, which makes me think the management team have finally found the marketing team hiding in a long-forgotten office somewhere or just playing jumping puzzles all day and are demanding they actually start doing their job and sponsoring some YouTubers or something.
We saw ads on various social media platforms talking about the game having the best mounts in the industry. We saw promos with other companies like Crucial and Alienware. We even saw them release the Why Wait to Ride a Dragon ad, which was obviously targeting players who play another game who, let's say was clearly inspired by some of Guild Wars 2's mounts. Listen, I love to see ArenaNet getting their product out there and touting their strengths. I'd love to see them showcase combat and skill animations at some point, or maybe talk about our raids and strike missions or PvP. In any event, I'm going to be giving the marketing department a W for sure, because this was a pretty good year for them. And I can't forget that ArenaNet is stepping up their Twitch game by finally implementing Twitch drops. During the 10-year anniversary / Steam launch event, all channels in the category had drops enabled, and this led to some pretty big viewership for the category. Later, for the ExtraLife campaign, ArenaNet partners could opt in for Twitch drops on our channels. It was a cool way to get views and some extra engagement from a segment of the player base that doesn't really engage with Twitch. During the Twitch drop campaigns, the viewership across the category goes up significantly, putting the game and its streamers in front of more people. And the way I see it, more visibility is a win.
Def command kill.
And we need it because the Guild Wars 2 category is somewhat dead otherwise. In 2022, ArenaNet and the community once again participated in the ExtraLife campaign to raise money for the Children's Miracle Network. This year, between all the individual streamers and teams working with Team ArenaNet, plus players purchasing the ExtraLife bundles from the gem store, over $260,000 were raised for the campaign, putting Team ArenaNet in the number 2 position for the year. And I believe this year we raised more money than any of the previous years too. It's always fun seeing people come out and support things like this, and my kids had a blast with the stream too because they could smash pies in my face. So good job to everybody at ArenaNet and in the community who helped us reach that second place slot. You guys are all amazing. Now I'm going to be giving this W to ArenaNet, but really the stars are all the people who supported the campaign, so good on you all. So I mean, looking at the chart, I guess ArenaNet did have a pretty good year after all. I did have to hand out a couple L's, but overall they had a successful year, and I think ArenaNet knows that. I mean, it is kinda hard to ignore the awards that they keep winning, like how PCGamer.com named Guild Wars 2 their best ongoing game during the 2022 Game Awards. Now I hope ArenaNet continues this momentum forward into 2023, staying strong with things like communication and sales and continuing to deliver a quality game that we all enjoy. Because the 2023 roadmaps haven't actually come out yet, let's go ahead and look to 2023 with the things that we do know are coming up. We know ArenaNet is working on a 4th expansion for Guild Wars 2. We know that you're going to drop a like on this video and leave a comment, sub to the channel, and swing by my Twitch stream to give a follow. You're also going to drop by the Discord server at some point and say hi, and give a follow on Twitter before that disappears. Links are going to be in the description for all those places. We know ArenaNet is working on an unannounced project in Unreal Engine 5, so I expect that we're going to hear something about that in 2023. We know ArenaNet is working on Season 6 and that it's being called End of Dragons content, so we're probably going to be visiting some of these labeled locations on the world map, like the Turtle Highlands or Kirin Peak. We also know that ArenaNet is hoping to make more improvements to the game regarding DirectX 11, World vs. World, and switching from Coherent to Chromium Embedded Framework to improve their in-game UIs and trading post. And there's probably some other things that I forgot. Anyways, thanks for watching guys, I had a lot of fun making this video and I hope you enjoyed it too. Now I have a lot of other videos planned for 2023, but editing videos, it takes a lot of time and a lot of work, so I'm going to try to produce this stuff whenever I can. I would really love it if you guys hit that sub button and click the notification bell, because whenever I do release something, I would love for you guys to watch it, and you're probably not going to know that it gets released if you don't hit that notification bell. So definitely hit the notification bell if you could, please. Until next time, guys, stay safe, be kind to each other, and I hope to see you around Interior at some point.